Course of the next hour. But we begin tonight with today's Supreme Court decision about the fate of former U.S. Army Captain James Petrangelo. Captain Petrangelo is a 6-year veteran of the U.S. Army, a 7-year veteran of the Vermont National Guard, a combat veteran of the First Gulf War, and after 13 years of honorable service to this country, Captain Petrangelo was fired because he's gay. In 2004, Captain Petrangelo and 11 other veterans in similar circumstances challenged their dismissal in federal court. A federal appeals court in Boston upheld the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and ruled against the veterans. Of those 12 plaintiffs in this case, Captain Petrangelo alone decided to appeal up to the Supreme Court. Today, the Supreme Court decided not to hear the case. So Captain Petrangelo is still fired, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell is still in place. Does this mean that Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been ruled definitively constitutional? No, that is not what this means. The Supreme Court has yet to test the law. Does this mean that there's been some new federal precedent set on the issue of Don't Ask, Don't Tell? No, it doesn't mean that either. Is this a huge loss for those who are seeking to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell? Actually, it is not. Most of the people fighting on the front lines to overturn this policy didn't think that this specific case was the case that they would be able to use to end the policy. So why then is this case today a big deal? It's a big deal because of this. Quote, anybody who is willing to serve our country and die on a battlefield for us and are patriots, that's the criteria for whether or not they should be able to serve in our military. Or this, quote, I will work for a full repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That work should have started long ago. It will start when I take office. America is ready to get rid of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. All that is required is leadership. That was candidate Obama during the presidential campaign. After he won the election, when he became President-elect Obama, he had this to say on the subject.
I think that it is no secret that I am a fierce advocate for equality for gay and lesbian Americans. It is something that I have been consistent on. And something that I intend to continue to be consistent on during my presidency.
A fierce advocate for equality for gay and lesbian Americans. Well, since he has been fierce advocate in chief, has he repealed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy? No. Has he pushed Congress to repeal the policy? Not really. Has he hit the pause button on investigating members of the military to ferret out who's gay and who's not? No, he has not. Has he used his stop-loss powers to put a hold on dismissals of people under the policy? No, he hasn't. In fact, as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Fierce Advocate actively is still firing people from the U.S. military because they're gay. And Captain Petrangelo's case goes one step further. It's the first case to feature the Obama administration arguing at the Supreme Court against a gay soldier in favor of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, telling the court the policy is, quote, rationally related to the government's legitimate interest in military discipline and cohesion. I wonder what his record would be like so far if he weren't such a fierce advocate for gay rights. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Rush Holt of New Jersey. He is a member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, chairman of the Select Intelligence Oversight Panel, and a co-sponsor of legislation in Congress that would overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Congressman Holt, it's really nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you, Rachel.
What happened to the Barack Obama who ran for president who was so against Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
Well, the most important thing is what you said a moment ago, is America is ready for the change, a change in this policy. It can come on a temporary basis from the White House, on a more permanent basis from Congress. One way or another, it is going to come. Clearly, it's an outmoded, outdated policy based on a fallacious view of morality, and it is leaving our country less secure.
You agree with his arguments, then? We're just still waiting for action on them, I suppose.
The action could come in several different ways,
yes.
And we are waiting for it, but it's going to come soon because the public is way ahead of the policymakers on this. You know, some weeks ago you had Lieutenant Dan Choi on your program. I happened to be in the Middle East at the time. And I was with servicemen and women in Iraq and other countries. You know, their private lives, their sexual orientation didn't come up once. You know, these are men and women doing a good job for our country, for the people back home. This is not, should not be an issue.
You have more than 140 co-sponsors on legislation right now to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. As I understand it, I spent some time tracking the bill today, and it seems like it's sort of cooling its heels in committee right now. Is there any political pressure to not move that bill, to let it just not happen now, to make sure that it doesn't roll forward this summer?
I don't know of any pressure. There is the usual inertia for any change. It would be good to have a word from leadership, a word from the White House to move it along, but I don't think there's any overt stop action.
Politics,
or covert stop action, for that matter. That's right.
Politics is the art of the possible. I mean, I think that when Bill Clinton addressed this issue and started to address this issue at the very beginning of his presidency, he would not have expected that what he'd end up with is a policy that would have 13,000 members of the military kicked out by the time that we speak now. Let me ask your viewers to think a moment on that 13,000 skilled people. In other words, we are operating now with fewer skilled, talented people than we should have defending our country. And meanwhile, using stop loss to keep people in who would like to get out, because we need them for their skills. Yes. Well, in terms of how this could be approached, is there a risk that if this were put forward this summer, with all the co-sponsors that you have, with the incredible Gallup ratings that we've got right now on this issue, 69% of the public.
There's some argument whether it's 75 or 69 or 68.
It's a huge majority in favor either way. Is there a risk that putting legislation forward now would result in some sort of political backlash in Washington that would result in the codification of some other new bad policy? Or is it really just a matter of making it better or leaving it as the status quo?
I don't think there's any chance of a backlash like that because of the numbers that you just talked about. The public is way ahead on this. It's by large margins. If it were a close call, you might worry about a backlash that would leave lingering long-term damage. I don't think so. A year ago, I was sitting in the rotunda at a memorial, or at a recognition ceremony of Harry Truman's desegregation, racial desegregation of the military 60 years before. And thinking about the improvements that came to the military and to society from that decision, I was really struck by the parallels.
Truman having not exactly been a civil rights crusader up until that point.
And furthermore, everybody said this will hurt morale.
Yeah.
This is, we shouldn't be doing this. It'll leave lingering damage. Well, it's been of great benefit to our country.
Briefly, President Obama could issue an executive order to stop the military from investigating whether or not people are gay, or to halt the dismissal process temporarily while the issue is looked into. Would you support either of those actions just to sort of stop the harm caused by the policy now while it can be considered at greater length?
Sure. But we can go farther.
Yeah. Congressman Rush Holt of New Jersey at the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, co-sponsor of H.R. 1283 to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, sir.